Well, the global economy has had its worst start to the year in decades. Does that mean we're heading for another global recession like in 2008? Or is the worst over now and it's time for a global bounce back? And will we in India be affected? Are we heading for a crisis or a slowdown in India? Or are lower oil prices and commodity prices going to help us stay away from a global downturn? With India's property prices down and with the stock market now at its lowest level in nearly a year and a half, should you go out and buy stocks and buy property hoping that things have hit a rock bottom and there's going to be a U-turn? Or is it going to get worse? And should you stay away from the markets altogether? In this series of top trends for the year ahead, last January we looked at what's going to happen in 2015 when Ruchir Sharma gave us his forecast for what lies ahead. And if you look at the web, at Twitter, Facebook and other blogs by economists, the assessment is almost universal that Ruchir's forecasts were amazingly prescient. For example, that the global economy will be sluggish and get worse over 2015, or about low oil prices, and on how Make in India will find it tough going in the face of global headwinds, and many more important trends that Ruchir mentioned. But Ruchir, for me, has had an amazing recognition globally for his analysis on China. And he said on this show last year, many of the issues in China that have been and are even now beginning to unfold. For example, he spoke here and in his writings extensively about the major problems with the Chinese economy and the growing national debt in China, a crucially important set of warnings, especially now that China is such a major player in the world economy. Now, Ruchir, you actually started writing about China more than 2 years ago, that there are warning signals, and nobody believed you then. I certainly didn't believe you. Still don't, actually. But
no, I just feel that, as far as China is concerned, I think we've all grown up being really fascinated by what China has achieved. And so was I for much of the last 30 years, that this is the single biggest economic miracle that we have seen in recent history. But something began to go wrong after the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. And that is something that we will discuss today.
That was the turning point.
That's right. That they ended up taking on far too much debt to sustain unrealistic growth targets. And I think that's the price that they're paying today with all the problems that they're facing.
Right. So what we plan to do today is, with Ruchir, go through what are the top trends for 2016. Let's start with the first one, Ruchir, about is there going to be a global recession? Is there not going to be? Are we going to come back out of it? And here's some of Ruchir's data. If you look at it, there's been a global recession every 8 years. And, and the last recession was 7 years ago, Ruchir, 2008. What are you trying to, I mean, that's not very subtle, right? You're telling, but here it is. Look at that. Every 8 years, there's a global recession, roughly, on average. And it's going sharply down towards a recession globally is about 2%. And it's heading towards that right now. Difficult to say whether it's going to be 2008, it's going to be a recession. What's the general trend right now?
Well, I think that the entire problem is this, that the global economy is weak, and I think it's still weakening. Last year was the worst year for the global economy since the financial crisis ended in 2008, 2009. Right. And the problem here is this, that if you look at long-term economic history, recessions follow expansions just like nights follow day. So it's like in terms of when you have a long expansion, some problem emerges in some part of the world, and that typically pulls the global economy down. And so that's what I'm really concerned about, which is that that this economic expansion is quite mature. This is an aging cycle. And so we need to be on the lookout for where are the risks, what can trip the global economy. As you said, there is no science to this, that this is an average number, once every 8 years.
You're the only one who admits there's no science. All us economists say we're pure scientific, it's purely on data points and we do science, but you're right, there's a lot of judgment, assessment, gut feel, and analysis, actually.
And this number of average, right? So this is once every 8 years as an average. We've had some longer cycles.
7 years, 10 years, yeah.
Right.